Get a room for Celebration 4, get mad about downloadable content, and get ready for new toys in 2010. It's January 4th, and you'll hear about those stories and not much more this week in Star Wars. This Week in Star Wars is your source for new and noteworthy developments in the world of Star Wars. I'm your host, Matt Fox. And now this week's lead story. Links were made available late last month on StarWarsCelebration.com for attendees of Star Wars Celebration 5 to reserve hotel rooms. Despite initial speculation that the rooms would go in a Comic-Con-like frenzy, they are still available at the time of recording at a number of rates and locations near the convention site. No word on what the level of demand for these rooms has been, or exactly how many rooms remain available. Star Wars Celebration 5, the official Lucasfilm convention, will be held August 12th through 15th in Orlando, Florida. And now for this week's collecting news. The post-holiday sales got off to a quick start, with reports of up to 50% off numerous Star Wars items at Walmart's as soon as December 26th. At the same time, Target began the clearance process for numerous staler items, such as the re-released Rancor, as well as recent waves of Clone Wars, Legacy, and Legends figures repackaged in exclusive 2-for-1 2-packs. While you may just be getting caught up on all the 2009 exclusives and late-arriving waves of Hasbro figures, internal Target scanning numbers have been leaking to the internet indicating new product for 2010, including new lines. As well as the not-surprising continuation of the Legends Basic and Clone Wars Basic figures, the internal Target information also indicates that there's going to be a return of something known as the 3 3/4 vintage figures at the $7.99 price point. The information also anticipates the return of the Super Deluxe vehicles at the $99.99 price point. Dorkier or more dedicated collectors will quickly notice that these Target DPCI numbers are all new, indicating that currently shipping waves of Clone Wars, Legends, and Legacy figures will likely be put on clearance in the near future, as the Target systems will consider the new product to be entirely new products and not a continuation of the same lines. This is the first time in several years that Target has not maintained DPCI numbers into subsequent waves of figures. A link to this information, which can be found in banthaskull.com, is available on the thisweekinstarwars.com website. One final collecting tidbit: reports surfaced on the web today on several sites that an unexpected exclusive started arriving in Walmart's this weekend. What made the discoveries even more surprising is what the products were. 2 different Unleashed battle packs with Clone War themes were found Walmarts across the country, ranging in price from $20 to $25 depending upon the location. Not only were new Walmart exclusives not expected, most people had thought that the Unleashed line was completely dead, as no new product had been seen in over a year. Perhaps more will be learned next month at New York Toy Fair, when Hasbro is expected to discuss its 2010 Star Wars product lineup. In video game news this week, when LucasArts announced the Force Unleashed Ultimate Sith Edition at the 2009 Comic-Con, perhaps the strongest selling point was the promised inclusion of a Hoth level in an expanded universe story involving Vader's secret apprentice. Indeed, at the time of this recording, that level remains the only piece of content in the Ultimate Sith Edition that is not available either in the original game or as downloadable content for popular consoles. Well, if you're one of the gamers who paid $40 for the Ultimate Sith Edition just to play that Hoth level, you may soon have a beef with LucasArts. Numerous reports have surfaced in recent days that the Hoth level will soon be available as downloadable content on the Xbox Live and the PlayStation Network. No official word yet from LucasArts on the availability of the level. And our last news item of the week: Star Wars returned to the small screen on January 1st when the Cartoon Network aired episodes 10 and 11 of the Clone Wars Season 2, entitled Grievous Intrigue and The Deserter. Fans of the animated adventures taking place between episodes 2 and 3 should not get too comfortable yet, as repeats return this Friday. Thanks for tuning in to the second episode of This Week in Star Wars. And this podcast originates in the Washington, D.C. area. And as some of you may know, we didn't have a baseball team here in Washington for about 30 years. Now, don't worry, this isn't becoming a baseball podcast. But during that time, one of the columnists in the Washington Post campaigned and agitated and did everything he could to encourage baseball to put a team back in the national capital. And when that finally happened about 5 years ago, they asked him how happy he was going to be on opening day. He said indeed, opening day would be great, but he wouldn't be confident and sure that baseball had actually returned for good until the second game. Well, that's sort of how I feel about this podcast. Maybe it wasn't the smartest thing ever to start a news podcast immediately before the news black hole that is the New Year holidays. But the fact is, we did. But here's episode 2, and it might be a week late, and the news might be a little thin on the ground, but nonetheless it's here, and I'm hoping that we're back on schedule. Next week we'll have another episode. Hopefully Lucas will have some news for us. And that was This Week in Star Wars. Join us again next week for more news, notes, and developments from the galaxy far, far away. Visit www.thisweekinstarwars.com, or for our lazier listeners out there, www.twisw.com, where you can find links and more details about the stories mentioned in this week's show, as well as the internet's finest collection of international mail catalogs. This Week in Star Wars. We prowl the web so you don't have to. This Week in Star Wars is not affiliated with Lucasfilm, any of its subsidiaries, or any other entity mentioned in this podcast. Star Wars, its characters and creations, are the property of Lucasfilm. All other trademarks are property of the respective trademark owners. This Week in Star Wars is intended for informational and entertainment purposes only. Invaluable technical assistance is provided by Webmaster Steve. Questions, comments, concerns, or news tips should be sent to host@thisweekinstarwars.com. More information, links to the stories presented, past episodes, and contact information is available at www.twisw.com.
And we're goddamn proud of all of you. It's just fantastic. Where's the cake?